But first, before we cross to the latest on the war in Gaza, we've got to start exposing the people here and making Australians less safe, in my opinion, by spreading fake news and dangerous views about the war between Israel and the Hamas terrorists who actually started it. I'll give you two of them. One of them, a prominent comedian. And I'll ask again, where is Prime Minister Anthony Albanese? Why so weak in countering this stuff? Now, the first of these fake news merchants is this guy, real estate developer Nasser Mashni of the Australian Palestine Advocacy Network, who comes on Sky News speaking softly of peace, poses with Foreign Minister Penny Wong, and they're both people of reason, Wong commiserating with the bombing, the explosion at a Gaza hospital. Well, Mashni is now very upset that 6 of our 7 living ex-Prime Ministers have signed a joint letter blaming the Hamas terrorist group, which runs Gaza, for starting this war with Israel by massacring 1,400 Israelis, most of them civilians, on October 7, raping women, burning children alive, taking 239 hostages. Well, suddenly, Mr. Reasonable, Nasser Mashni, smelled a Jewish conspiracy behind this letter. He said he was alarmed that these ex-Prime Ministers allow themselves to be used as a tool in a campaign by the pro-Israel lobby to minimise Israel's gross violations, and signed a statement, even these guys, drafted by the Zionist Federation of Australia. So much bias. In fact, the statement had been drafted by Malcolm Turnbull with input from the other former MPs and of PMs. And Turnbull fired back and wanted to make it very clear this statement was drafted exclusively by the former PMs and nobody else. I mean, seriously. I mean, why was Wong even with this man posing with him in the first place? Because this Mashni has retweeted a Green senator's lie that Israel bombed that hospital in Gaza, when in fact all the evidence was that it was a rocket misfiring from the Palestinian side, and his call for the destruction of Israel at one of Melbourne's anti-Israel protests.
I've never felt so alone when our Prime Minister condemned Palestinian violence. From the river to the sea! From the river to the sea!
What a turkey. Let me again explain his chart. From the river to the sea. Well, this is the river on the right and the sea on the left, and in between is Israel. Mashni actually wants everything in between. That's Israel destroyed. Now, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese was asked about this letter today as well, and why his hero, Paul Keating, was the only surviving ex-Prime Minister who refused to sign it. Refused to sign a letter blaming Hamas and calling on it to free the hostages. I tell you how weak he is. Listen to him distancing himself from that letter's statement of fact.
I don't think that's a question for Paul Keating, I would have thought. I support the positions that I've taken. Israel has a right to defend itself, but how it does that matters. And we need to make sure as well that every civilian life is valued, whether it be Israeli or Palestinian.
What is it with this guy? He still hasn't even corrected his own false insinuation that Israel had bombed that Gaza hospital, when in fact it was a Palestinian rocket, it seems, from all the available evidence that hit its car park. And he hasn't joined other world leaders in visiting Israel to show support. He hasn't rebuked one of his ministers, Tony Burke, for supporting a council flying the Palestinian flag for as long as this war lasts. I mean, is Albanese that scared of the Muslim vote? Or so scared of his own party's radical left? If there is a leadership challenge, watch out for Burke. And so you've got men like Mashni making their claims. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Well, something really is going weird with this government. But to that second guy spreading wild claims of the kind that I fear could motivate some hotheads here to do something very stupid. And this time it's Nazim Hussain, whose shtick, as you may know, is telling jokes about how racist Australians are, especially the Muslims. Very helpful stuff. But what he told another anti-Israel rally well, that was no joke. That really was no joke. Attacking the Prime Minister and tying the Aboriginal cause to the Palestinian one.
I
never imagined that that same man who campaigned for the voice to elevate First Nations people, Indigenous Australians, would a week later endorse and justify the brutal murder of Indigenous Palestinians.
How stupidly dangerous for so many activists to link Aboriginal politics to Palestinian ones. Do they really want to incite a kind of Palestinian way of prosecuting their cause? I mean, that's just sick. But then there was this inflammatory claim from Nazim Hussain.
I never imagined that he would support the cutting off of food, water, medicine, electricity, internet, and contact with the outside world, meaning that they are getting murdered in the dark.
I mean, seriously, do I have to fact check it all? I mean, cutting off food in the internet. This was posted by a Palestinian photojournalist in Gaza on the internet just yesterday. Shopping for things like food in Gaza. As for cutting off water, yes, Israel did order a complete siege of the Gaza Strip. And that did mean no food until last week, delivered through Egypt. Electricity, well, actually Gaza is supposed to make 50% of its own. And no fuel, that's true, but Hamas supplies 50% of its own electricity as reserve fuel for its own terrorists. So it's got fuel. And if there's not enough of all these things, well, maybe it's because it's spending money on rockets rather than on water. Israel supplies only 9% of Gaza's water. It could have even more, but Gaza, Hamas actually boasts of digging up its own water pipes to convert them into rockets to fire at Israel. It's been firing them for weeks. Nazim Hussain is also wrong when he says the people of Gaza are dying in the dark, like, the internet's cut off so we can't see them. I mean, really, how else are we getting all these videos and vision to you every evening about the dying there? But as I said yesterday, the leader of Hamas, which rules Gaza, he makes actually sure that his people die. He makes sure that they die for their cameras, not in the dark at all. And he has told them, in fact, to die.
كما قلت وفي كل مرة أكرر إن دماء الأطفال والنساء والشيوخ لا أقول تستصرخكم بل نحن الذين نحتاج هذه الدماء لكي توقظ فينا روح الثورة.
It's a death cult. You've got to know it's a death cult. And what really gets me is that I now hear Arab reporters in the Middle East asking us much tougher questions than I hear from so many Labor ministers or so many journalists in the Western media, not just the ABC. Arab journalists are actually seeing straight through Hamas. And they're seeing it deliberately leaving its people out where they will be killed. Right near Hamas military assets, built near their schools, in their schools, without even bomb shelters to protect them. Well, says an Hamas leader just last Friday, bomb shelters for our people, that's not our responsibility, while Hamas itself hides in tunnels deep underground, tunnels that civilians may not use.
البعض يتساءل وهذا سؤال رائج وشائع يعني من قام بتشييد 500 كيلومتر من الأنفاق لماذا لم يشيد مآوي يلجأ إليها المدنيون خلال القصف؟
نحن شيدنا الأنفاق لأنه لا نملك ما ندفع به عن أنفسنا من القتل والاستهداف. هذه الأنفاق من أجل أن نحمي أنفسنا من الطائرات، نحمي مقاتلين من الأنفاق. أما القطاع غزة فأنت تعلم والجميع يعلم بأنه 75% منه لاجئين، واللاجئين هو مسؤولية الأمم المتحدة في حمايتهم.
That's what they say in Arabic. Not in English, of course, because you wouldn't want to hear that in English. That's why I've got to play you these things. They want people to die. War is horrible and innocents will die. But you've got to call out the people that bring that war too close to our home now by not calling out the monsters who started it. The monsters who want their people to die have organised for it to happen and are spreading fake news of atrocities. And you've got to ask our government, what is it doing to counter this wicked and dangerous misinformation? Prime Minister, you've got to speak up.